Well, I want to thank Jono Freeman for joining us today. Jono is a trustee and board member of the Francis Bacon Society in London. And so today we'll talk about Sir Francis Bacon and his connections, his life and his connections to Shakespeare. So Jono, how did you become involved, one with the society and then two with Francis Bacon and the Shakespeare works?
Yeah, so I found out about the authorship question kind of like I did a master's in theatre a few years back, and right at the end, and it wasn't anything that I learnt through the uni. It was a friend. He was we were talking about Shakespeare because I wanted to write my thesis on playing Iago, which I'd done the year before. And we were talking about Shakespeare, and we're both kind of fans of Mark Rylance. And he was like, "Oh, you should watch this video. It's, it's about like Shakespeare may not have been Shakespeare." And I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" But I watched it, and yeah, it kind of just changed my life, like honestly. And I sort of went down the rabbit hole, and I didn't find I suppose I did. I found Francis pretty soon after that, but not immediately. I think I had a little fling with Oxford first because I'd seen, that film Anonymous years ago. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't see it, but I'm aware of it though. Yeah.
Yeah, and Oxford is such an attractive, alluring character in that. So I think, and he is on the surface like, he is quite an alluring choice, I suppose. But then
is this De Vere?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's the thing. He's the popular choice at the moment. But then of course I did more reading and I looked more into things, and then once I found Bacon, Oxford was Gonski's, and I immediately wanted to find a collective who I could talk to and bond with about this find that I'd made, because initially I couldn't find much on it, and people I talked to didn't seem to know much about it. So it seemed like, yes, something that was still hadn't quite taken off yet, perhaps. But anyway, so I wrote to the society and I became friends with the president there, and started making some videos for the society, and have sort of stayed in touch with them over the years, and I'm now friends with the principal there.
Okay.
It's sort of, it is quite, well, I find it is quite life-changing, the whole thing. Finding both of those things has been a really, I feel blessed to have come across both these things, because they are, part of the mysteries of life that I think, at a certain age we have a fondness for, and where we have, I don't know, you've got to have an open heart, but you've also you've got to be equipped to kind of to deal with it, and to have some time to spend with it.
Yeah. What are some of the things the Francis Bacon Society does?
Yeah. Do you know, I feel the society is something like 134 years old. It's probably older than that. I'm probably in big trouble because I can't remember exactly how old it is, but it's been around for a long time. It's got a really long history, and it publishes, it has this wonderful publication called Baconiana, and and a lot of those are online now. I think it's the bacon.org, but you can find articles that are written, early 1900s, or sometimes they're 1960s, and they're still, it's still sort of fresh and relevant, and it's wonderful to be a part of a tradition. It has a really interesting tradition, but I fear that that it sort of had a heyday quite a while ago. I feel like, I don't know, and maybe this has something to do with Oxford as well. I feel like there was a real explosion. Everyone's crazy for Bacon, but then that sort of, maybe it died off and Oxford came in, and I feel like there are people, you know, who are still, who love Bacon and are so devoted to him, and will always stick in there and fight for him. But it does feel like, we've got some work to do, in terms of competition with other fraudsters, you know.
For the title of Shakespeare author. So the society not only promotes his known works.
Sorry, I was rambling there. They have a lot of, since I joined, there's been a lot of, they have meetings and talks. People come and share their research, and Q&As and bickies and tea. Recently, there's been some really great things going on with Sally Gibbons, the principal. She's been doing a lot of great stuff. They like going to Gray's Inn, because, you know, I feel like there's some great connections we can make as Baconians with places and spaces that he had a significant role. I mean, at Gray's Inn, he had a massive impact there. And so the society went there and checked the space, and there's a lovely hall there as well, where I think a lot of the, you know, first performances of some of these Shakespeare plays were probably happening.
Okay.
So community, there's a nice community, but I think, you know, room for growth, I think.
Good.
Always.
Yeah. And it does have a YouTube channel, so people can go to YouTube.
Yep. And that's really taken off, I think. I mean, it was sort of, I think, COVID times when everyone started making videos. It seemed to, it pushed us all into that media, I think. So a lot of, there's been a lot of new stuff on YouTube, which is great, because, you know, this is the great thing about these times. You know, we can talk about generations of Baconians, but we're blessed now that all of these resources are so available online, or we have all of the information we need so easily, so that we can put everything together. We can find originals of manuscripts, and we can, you know, we can just tap into such a rich history as well, because the authorship issue has a long history. I mean, arguably it's around from the time the name first comes out. You know, when nobody knows William Shakespeare, a poet or a playwright. And all of the evidence is so cryptic and, you know, just very unusual and atypical of writers of that time, you know, especially, you know, and I guess we're just okay with the fact that, you know, there are no manuscripts in Stratford man's hand. We're okay with that. I mean, and we're okay with the fact that there's no Shakespeare manuscripts too. We're okay with that. That's normal. It's okay. And the thing with Bacon is, you know, we have manuscripts of Bacon. You know, we have the Promuse, which has, you know, stuff that's in the plays, in Bacon's like notebook. I mean, you want a manuscript, that's the closest thing you've got. And we also have the Northumberland manuscript, which is a sort of, you know, fire damaged bundle that has a list of things that are kept within it. And there are, you know, we've got Bacon's name and Shakespeare's name on the same page. Again, and, you know, copies of the Richard plays, Richard II, Richard III, they're in a bunch of papers that Bacon owned. We have that too, but it's not evidence. It's
So there is some physical evidence that exists that connects the Shakespeare works to Francis Bacon.
Yeah, for sure. So there's bits of evidence like that too. You can call those, I don't know, external evidence, but I think, there's evidence, within, the plays and all of Bacon's writings. They all share the same spirit, the same, philanthropic kind of path that he's on, whatever branch he's following, whatever he's writing. And he can write, I think, he can write in any style. We were talking about, he's a prose writer, he doesn't write poetry, but all of his work is so beautifully poetic in how he expresses himself. It's in the poetry is always in his writing, as are, the metaphors, the analogies. It's all there.
Yeah. And before we kind of get into Bacon's life and his connection to Shakespeare, do you also have a YouTube channel where people can go and learn?
I do have a YouTube channel, Joe. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I do. Jono Freeman 33.
Okay. And we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and like it was a really great way to just sort of like share some of the stuff, because I think you find this stuff and it really inspires you. And for me, I guess I'm a teacher also, so I get inspired, and then my first instinct is just to want to tell someone, to want to share what I found. And even though it's frosty most of the time what you get, but I mean, online it's great. You can just put it out there and put it up the pole, see who salutes. But that was just a great way to just sort of share what I was finding. Are you
still actively doing that? Are you still creating content for your?
I took a break for a couple of years there because I'd sort of felt like that's good. I've said things that I wanted to say, but I did a couple of others recently because it was the Folio's 400th birthday, which I think is it's a great date to celebrate that. It's rather than Shax's birthday or Shax's death, or it's nice to like focus on the work and date something special around when that particular piece came out, because that was one of Bacon's ships, one of his children, and and the first time that theatre was literature. It's a massive kind of moment for theatre and literature together. A special moment.
And you're referring to the 1623 Folio. 2023 was the 400th anniversary.
Yes, yeah. So I made a couple of vids. Well, I made a vid about the Folio and Bacon's connection to the Folio. And then BBC brought out a documentary about the life of Shakespeare. It was called Rise of a Genius. And again, the same old sort of rubbish about the Stratford man, all of this really historically inaccurate stuff, but with really slick production and heavyweight actors that aren't always talking about the guy, the man, the poet. They're just talking about the amazing works most of the time, but they're chucked in there to make it sort of, so you're brainwashed. You're like, Brian Cox is there, yeah, all right, yeah. So you sort of, you buy into it. You buy into all the rubbish. And so as you can see, I got a bit riled up. I get a bit riled up about Shacks, about Stratfordians. I get a bit riled up, Joe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so again, the video, I made a video which was sort of cathartic. It was a nice way to just like, express, just let off some steam and just sort of share with people, this is what we actually know. And it's like, it's so bare what we actually know about the guy. And the little that we do know about the guy is way off with what is required for the plays.
And of course, you're referring to William Shakespeare from the town of Stratford upon Avon.
Yeah, William Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
Or William Shakespeare, or whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
But yes, with a name remarkably similar to Shakespeare, but never spelled Shakespeare like, as in author. He never spelled his name. But we only have six signatures of his, again, which aren't Shakespeare. Yeah. They're spelled differently.
And rather illegible too, right? His writing was not that great.
Yeah.
But
scroll, because people at the time, they weren't reading or writing, so his family is illiterate, his children are illiterate, so we can assume he's illiterate, but maybe he's had a few practices. But maybe those signatures aren't even his, we don't know. Yeah. But again, nothing in his hand.
Right. Nothing was left. No books, really. Right.
No letters. No letters either, which is weird because he's moving between London and Stratford. He probably needs to fire off several letters a day, but no letters. Yeah. So probably can't write.
Right.
Maybe he can read. I think he can read a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe. If we assume he was even if he was a bit actor, maybe, he didn't necessarily need to read the lines. Somebody could have parroted the lines to him. I mean,
Yeah. And so the people who believe William Shakespeare from Stratford upon Avon, they're called Stratfordians. People who believe De Vere is the author are called Oxfordians. And of course, people who believe Bacon, they are Baconians. So those are kind of the three major schools.
There are Marlovians too, I believe.
Yeah.
That he survived his death and he was whisked off to Italy and then he sent back his plays to Walsingham because they were buddies, maybe butt buddies.
Okay. So obviously from what you're saying too, there's just more evidence, physical and otherwise, and we'll talk about that connect Bacon more than the guy from Stratford.
Yes, well, if you look at the plays and you look at the ingredients, what you need to write those plays, and then you put that next to Bacon's CV. Wouldn't it be amazing if Bacon had a CV? Bacon's CV, you put those two things together, they align, they completely tally more than any other candidate. But also looking at the timeline, a lot of those guys are dead when the First Folio came out. They were a long time dead. And the folio has new plays and amendments to old plays that are significant. Mm-hmm. So again, the timeline for me wipes out a lot of those guys, and maybe they had some sort of involvement in the circle. I think there's a few secret societies that are happening at the time, of which Bacon was the head of some of these. Maybe they had involvement in those circles too, but how much of the writing people in the circle were doing, I'm not sure. I mean, Dawkins is really great in how he describes Shakespeare as like a Renaissance art studio where you've got, Leonardo, you've got the primary artist painting, but he's got kind of, he's got recruits to fill in the places, to fill in other places. And, I think the plays are so full of very expert knowledge in a lot of different fields. And I think Bacon was really, you know, he was a well, I think, of knowledge and experience, and I think he was able to interact with people and pull out of them all the information he needed, just and sort of like connect with their soul as he was doing that. And then I think he was able, I think he was a chameleon also. I think he was then able to shift and change who he was and what he was doing based on the environment he was in and what he was doing, like who he was writing for or what company he was in. I think he was across humanity, which we say about Shakespeare from Stratford. He was across humanity. He was in touch with the upper classes and the lower classes, but with Shakespeare, it's because he was in the pub at the tavern, and sailors would come in and talk about stuff, and people would just come in and talk about stuff, and he'd hear it and he'd go, yeah, chuck that in a play.
Yeah.
That's how we think Shakespeare did it. But with Bacon, not only is he extremely well educated, he's experienced in life, in travel, in interacting with everyone and drawing knowledge out of all of those experiences and remembering all of those and storing all of those. And then he's able to pour all of that into his writings, whether it's the plays or otherwise.
Yeah. And I'll do my best to kind of go chronologically through his life. So who was he raised by?
So he's raised by the Bacons, Lady Anne Bacon, and who was a lady in waiting of Elizabeth's. So one of Elizabeth's ladies in waiting, and Nicholas Bacon, who was the keeper of the seal. So Elizabeth had a really lovely connection with the Bacons, and so she had her first child, and she gave the child to the Bacons. And I think Lady Anne Bacon had lost a child not long before that, actually. So they took Francis, and there's some interesting stuff about when he's registered as Mr. Francis Bacon, which is kind of interesting, I think. And Rawley, his chaplain, when he talks about where Bacon was born, he says that he was born in York. I can't remember if he was born in York House brackets or York Place. I can't remember if that switched, but York House and York Place were right next to each other, and the Queen resided in one and the Bacons resided in the other at the time. So Rawley was being ambiguous as to which one of the places Bacon was actually born in.
Okay.
But in terms of who Elizabeth could have given Francis to, I think it's one of those things. I think it's something that's divine. That choice was like, part of how Bacon, develops and grows because of this hothouse of education that he lived in, this hothouse of learning that he lived in, homeschooled by very intelligent people who teach him languages, classics, writing, and also the need to write anonymously and using pseudonyms. He gets all of that. And apparently Nicholas was quite he was a lawyer as well, and quite, again, intelligent and witty and always up for a jest. And apparently that's something that Francis kind of got from Nicholas Bacon. But Lady Anne Bacon was a little bit more, traditional, I suppose. I don't think she liked theatre or or poetry so much, but classics, yes, history, all of those things. But yeah, so, and he's raised, I think, some of the time in London, in York House or York Place, can't remember which one, but a lot of the time in Gorhambury in the UK. And you can go to Gorhambury and see the ruins of where he grew up in St Albans. And, you know, St Albans is such a magical place. It has such a rich history that ties in with Freemasonry as well. And the first Roman theatre in the UK is on Bacon's doorstep in Gorhambury. Nicholas Bacon also very interested in history and the Verulamium, which is the Roman town that was there. Yeah, so grew up there. And that is, you know, if you're looking for the soul of Shakespeare, of the place where, I don't know, Shakespeare lives, it's not horrible Stratford, which is like so grubby and cheap and nasty and money hungry and all a fantasy land, none of it's real. None of those buildings are what they say they are. It's sort of like Disneyland. But if you go to Gorhambury and St Albans, it's like you feel it. It's like it's waiting, you know, just till the right time when I guess Bacon is recognized, and then hopefully there'll be a place where people can go and really tap into where Shakespeare was from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Gorhambury is that north of London by an hour?
Yeah, a little bit north of London. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And like you mentioned, so there are some ruins there still of where he resided when he was out of London.
Yeah, just a little bit. I really like, I mean, it was once a huge, kind of a huge building, huge estate, because the Queen visited there a number of times. And on one of the visits, Nicholas Bacon extended the house, you know, because this was a time, if the Queen came, you had to like build a place, you know, get ready to party and spend a whole bunch of cash because the Queen's coming. So it became quite nice. And also later on, Bacon did a lot of his gardening. He planted and for the gardens there too, which I think were once quite, because Bacon was a gardener and loved gardens. Also at Gray's Inn, he was responsible for the gardens there. And at Twickenham Lodge, where he used to chill out and write his plays. Also beautiful gardens there. And gardens, Shakespeare is full of gardens. And you can find in Bacon's writings about horticulture, botany, you can find him, you know, making note of what he's found, and then you see it used in Shakespeare as metaphor or as imagery, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. And he has a well-known essay, right, on gardens or
yeah. Well, this is the great thing. You can find I think the essays are only a small part of his writings. You know, he wrote a whole bunch of stuff, but also, you know, we don't know how many pen names he was writing under. Like, we really don't know. I suspect he was writing under a lot. And also, for me, I don't believe that Bacon died when we conventionally say he did, and so I think he could have still been writing afterwards. And so how many pies did he have his fingers in? I think who knows? I think it could be much more than we imagine.
Mm-hmm. And so the parents he grew up with, the father Nicholas, had a great legalistic mind, a great wit, was also into literature. His mom was also into literature and translation, right? Didn't she translate a lot?
She tutored Henry's young prince, I think. Henry's son.
Oh, Henry VIII's son?
Yeah, I think so. She was tutor. She tutored someone, and I think it was him. Anyway, yeah, she's royal caliber tutor, and she's done some. She was a writer as well. Yeah, really well known for being smart.
So we're talking about
his mother.
So in reference to Francis, so we have a mind steeped in writing and legal writings, and also probably meeting a lot of people would come to the Keeper of the Seal, right? So he probably...
Yes, he's connected to the court for sure, and especially when he's staying in London on the Thames, right next to the Queen. He would have been seeing all kinds of amazing stuff, and it would have all just been feeding his brilliant mind, you know. And I think that's quite clear that Shakespeare knows the court in several countries, and he's writing from the court down. He's not you know, he's not some actor writing up. He's, you know, so, you know, he's writing across society. He knows and understands all levels, but yeah, he's writing top down.
He's in it, he's among it.
And Bacon is exposed to that from from the start. He's born into the court, and yes, he's the concealed son of Elizabeth too. So, and it's clear she has her eye on him while he's growing up. You know, she calls him the little Lord Keeper or something, and I think Bacon, I think, has this, must have been quite a nice kind of experience in his younger years. And then I think when I can't remember how old he is. I think maybe he's, I want to say maybe he's 14 or 16. He's very young, but I think when he finds out who his parents really are. And when that happens, he is immediately sent off to France. So the Queen kind of goes, "Ugh!" and flicks him off to France because of this thing that happens. And it's very it's very important no one finds out about, you know, his birth. So he's whisked off to France. But again, this is one of these amazing things that happen in Bacon's life. It's like this journey, this kind of like preordained journey through life, where things are, you know, going to happen, but they steer him towards his greatness. It's like what's that quote? You know, you whipped along the road, the whips of anyway. So he goes to France, and when he's in France, that's when he sees how revered poets are there, and how the poets are using that really sort of the I guess the more superior French language. They're using language to educate and to lift the culture of the French people, and the aristocracy there respect that. Whereas in England, the aristocracy did not respect poetry at all. You know, there was no respect for poetry, and you were like dissed if you did, you know, like, which is why poets published anonymously, because, I mean, you know, most things were not, you know, I think it was a really suppressed culture at the time. I think censorship was really full on at that time. So, yeah. So not only was poetry not respected, it was dangerous too. So all things that point to pseudonyms, the need for pseudonyms and to write anonymously. But anyway, he went to France and I think he works, it's one of the first steps on his life mission, which is to use poetry to use, I guess, I'm struggling to, sorry.
All right.
He wanted to transform the culture through language, and the best way to do that was through poetry. But an even better way to do that is through theatre. And so, because theatre was the best way to reach everyone at that time. Church and the theatre, the two main spaces where people came together, where if you want to drive home a message, they're the times that they're the places that you can do it. And and I think his father Dudley was kind of important in creating those first spaces in London, because before that time there are no theatres in London. There's no theatre as such, there's little roaming companies doing sort of street stuff. Church is kind of using theatre to creatively tell stories, but there's nothing like the theatre that all just develops within such a short space of time. It's like 20 years, I think, the English Renaissance. In 20 years, it's just like it fully flowers in that really short space of time, historically, a really short space of time.
And we'll get more into France in a little bit, and then so as a child, was he his classic education was that at the hands of his mother?
Yeah. And you can I went online and I read somewhere about the average day for an aristocratic child, their homeschooling at that time, and it was really intense. It was like, all of the really sort of, crucial subjects all day, languages. So I think that was, his homeschooling, was top class in the country. I don't think you could have got better homeschooling than what Bacon got.
Yeah, I think they called it the trivium and the quadrivium, kind of the 7 liberal arts. It had math, poetry, language, some other things. Yeah.
Which is all like all the things we think of when we think of a Renaissance man, isn't it? It's arts and sciences. He's multifaceted. And
then from his childhood he goes to university, and where does he go and at what age?
So he goes to, I'm trying to think of the chronology. I think he goes to Cambridge first when he's very young, and doesn't have such a good time there. He's only there for a couple of years. Bless them, they still have they have a statue of him in the chapel there, Trinity College, which is where he went to Trinity College, which was interestingly Henry VIII's college and not where Nicholas Bacon went. I think Nicholas Bacon went to a different college, but Bacon went to Henry VIII's college, Trinity, and they have a statue of him there. So they're obviously proud to have had Bacon there. But honestly, Bacon, he was scathing of, I think it wasn't directed specifically at Cambridge. It was just like learning's got to change, because nothing's getting done here. People are just talking in circles. We're not getting anywhere. So at a very young age, he has the plan to change the world, to reform the whole world, to find a new way of doing things, a new way of learning. Yeah. And I think he's inspired by Nicholas Bacon with that too. I think Nicholas Bacon had ideas about that too. So again, he's very, the Bacons are a huge part of his early development, and that early development is something that sticks with him his whole life. He never wavers from the things that he puts in place then in those early years. But then he goes to Gray's Inn, still quite young. I think, he was very, when he was admitted, I think he was very young for lawyers at that time. And he aced it. Was amazing. And Burley apparently watched one of his first cases and was like, whoa, you need to write a report about how amazing this was for the Queen. So I think he was awesome. But it wasn't Bacon. Bacon thought he was wasting his time with law, because he was like, I can be doing stuff that really matters rather than squabbling over this stuff, But there's always like, at this point, it's always like, where does his money come from? Because Nicholas Bacon didn't leave him anything in his will, whether that was intentional or not. Francis was left without anything when his father died. So his father died, and Francis had a dream about it, and he came back to England from France after his father died. And I think that's either when he went, that's maybe when he went to Gray's after that.
And just to go back to your point, Kent, so at Cambridge and other places, they kind of regurgitated the Greek philosophers, right? So it was just kind of going round and round about, and so he kind of was, that's pointless. We need to study our environment. We need to study ourselves, that sort of thing. He said that's true learning.
Yeah, and I think, I don't think they encouraged debate about things, and I don't think they wanted to, talk ideas through or challenge ideas or find new ways, and so that must have been really frustrating for Bacon, but a lot of his life, maybe, if you think about anyone who's really ahead of their time, you wonder, is it frustrating, like having just being disappointed, try, keep up, everyone, keep up. But I think he was really disappointed with going with the university. Maybe he thought it was going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow, and it was not. Mm-hmm. So he didn't stay.
And then he goes to France, right? Was it Amias? I don't know if I'm pronouncing Amias Pauli or
okay. So he's kind of on the royal train, taken everywhere. And it's interesting to wonder about the French and whether they knew he was a royal bastard, or how he, I suspect the courts were quite gossipy and that word got around. But as long as you weren't, you couldn't talk about Bacon being the son of Elizabeth. You were punished. It was like, she'd take your head or other parts if you talked about it. So it was a court secret, I think. I think some people, and Coke, one of Bacon's rivals, even, insulted him once, or tried to insult him about being a royal bastard, and got away with it. But it was a court secret, I think. And so I think the French court probably also knew. But all kind of blown away by Francis and his Hilliard paints a portrait of him around that time and writes, something along the lines of, I wish I could paint his mind, So I think he's, he's sort of like a prodigy. So he was probably wowing the French courts.
Yeah. Probably knew French, probably, right, could speak French fluently. And
probably a number of languages at that point, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And
he's across so many languages, I think. And again, that's what gives him the ability to create all of that new language, you know, because he's kind of a wordsmith. He's able to,
Yeah.
And
he's got the ear. He's got the ear for it.
Yeah. And just the brilliant creative mind to, rework things, put old things. He's great at just adapting sort like anything, just sources or ideas, or he's great at taking them and then just making them into something amazing.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, he interacts with the court in France, and he they talk about language, but he also learns about secret societies in France.
I think he makes some connections on the mainland there.
Do you think that's where he got the brainchild for secret societies? Was his youthful travels in France?
Yeah, I think maybe some of these things were. I think a lot of these things were around already, but I think he was able to, again, you know, transform them into something new. Take something with the Masons, the Freemasonry, which was around, I think, but give it a purpose and a structure, and make it something that's vital. Because I think there was a need for that at the time. Very dangerous to think scientifically at that time. Scientists are like burnt at that time, so you had to be very careful with knowledge. But so there's groups of people that want to pursue knowledge, but you have to be careful about it, because you die for this type of thing. So I think secret societies are born from that context. These days, maybe it's just a bunch of dudes that want to get together and knock out some cool rituals and have chats afterwards. I don't know, you know, how vital they are today or how much power they have today. Who knows? They're secret societies. But back then, I think it comes out of a need for, there's a group of people that are wanting to share ancient wisdom but have to be very careful about how they do that. And I think he meets some people on the mainland for sure, where he goes, makes some connections. Because I think he has connections with kind of like, he has not like Templar, the Knights Templar as well. I think he has connections there. So underground, I think, for sure. He's making connections with underground kind of free thinkers, and making connections that, he'll use the rest of his life, I think.
Yeah. And does he fall in love in France?
Yeah. You're good, Joe. You know the history. You know, you're just like pulling little things out of me, but you already know. You're across the story. So you've got this amazing young genius in love for the first time. And so I think a lot of the sonnets I think the sonnets are all through Bacon's life, and they've all been, you know, mixed up and jumbled around with purpose. I'm sure it's not random. But I feel like Romeo and Juliet is also really, again, one of those earlier plays, and I think definitely inspired by, you know, the author being in love. I think Love Labour's Lost too is, maybe there's a bit of that romance in there as well. Because again, I think that's kind of an early-ish play of Shakespeare, and it's got a lot of the French court in there as well, and the man clubs, you know, like Gray's Inn, bit of a man club. And the secret societies too, they're kind of men clubs.
Yeah.
But it's great because he's kind of satirizing men clubs. He's kind of saying, you know, men clubs is not what it's about. Love. It's all about love. It's the other great thing about Bacon is that, you know, everything is about truth, and the truth is love, you know. A bit like Jesus, you know. It's the same vibe.
Yeah. And then, like you mentioned, so for, I don't know if a lot of Americans know, but so he comes back and he eventually goes into Gray's Inn. Can you talk about the Inns of Court and kind of what they are in English society?
Yeah, so I think they were, you know, they for lawyers, that's a training ground for lawyers, but also for young noblemen. Like, you would be sent there not just for learning about law. I think it was also learning about court. So it would be a good place to go to prepare yourself for court. So Oxford, De Vere, he also went there. And so, and you know, there's a lot of crossover between Bacon and De Vere. So, I mean, all of the arguments the Oxfos use can be applied to Bacon, just better. But so, yeah. And as part of so it's like where you go before you go to court. So, and really important people would come to the Inns of Court for revels and these big sort of celebrations that were held at Gray's that became quite a big deal. And that Bacon was the head guy, the conjurer. He was kind of responsible for writing a lot of that stuff, putting it together. So, yeah, again, he's connected to the theatre. He's involved, you know. So he's writing it when he's a boy. He's, he's probably exposed to all of the pageantry of the court, because I think the Queen was using theatre too as a kind of propaganda machine. I think there were a lot of kind of theatrical displays happening that were funded by her nobles that kind of, you know, spread her popularity and her power.
These revels, these masks, these were kind of small plays, small theatrical pieces, usually performed either for classmates and or for aristocracy and the
dignitaries, yes, or you know, anyone, the who's who would have come, including the Queen as well.
And this would have been in the 1580s.
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of mid to late 1580s.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And so he has a mask that he puts on there called the Knights of the Helmet, which, you know, to me is kind of like it's a representation of this sort of secret band or the secret fraternity that was trying to bring ancient wisdom invisibly, anonymously, which was what the helmet signified. So Knights of the Helmet is sort of a reference to Athena, which was his muse. And, you know, the helmet signified invisibility, and her, you know, she shook her spear at the serpent of ignorance. And so the Knights of the Helmet was his kind of a representation of this group of pens that were trying to bring light. The spear becomes the pen, and trying to bring light through literature, disseminating knowledge through literature. And so he has, this mask of the Knights of the Helmet, which, is really interesting and really kind of important, because it's a representation of what he's trying to do.
And I don't know if he refers to them or not as his good pens later on, but do you think that's where kind of he begins to connect with others? Was at Gray's Inn?
I'm sure he's connecting with people everywhere he goes. Like, you know, at Cambridge, I'm sure he had people he was connecting with. I think he must have attracted a lot of attention. Like, I think he's connected with Dee as well. You know, Dee, the Queen's astrologer, who was like,
Oh, John Dee.
yeah. I think, you know, Bacon, if we're talking about groups, secret societies, whatever, I think Dee was also heading some sort of group at the time, which he then, I think, handed over to Bacon. So I think Bacon takes a lot of Dee's ideas. I think Dee was like what would you call him?
A mentor.
A magus of.
Oh, yeah. Was into alchemy and other.
Yeah. And which is what Shakespeare is, alchemy. It's like it's sort of a transforming of our souls into something
kind of base desires into spiritual.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When is the first Shakespeare play published or performed? No, published.
I think a bunch of them are published, and they're first published anonymously. A lot of stuff is published anonymously and performed anonymously as well, I think, without any writer's name attached to it. I think the first time the name Shakespeare appears was for the two poems, Venus and Adonis, and the Rape of Lucrece, I think it is. So that's where the name first appears. So it doesn't appear on a play first. It appears on these poems. But I think it appears for the first time on Love's Labour's Lost. But I'm not quite sure what the date of that is. That's the first time it appears in print. But remember, it also appears on a bunch of other plays that don't make it into the folio. There's a whole bunch of other plays that have the name Shakespeare printed on it, but they don't make it to the First Folio. So, but it's the name of who wrote the play, which wasn't very important for people back then. Playwrights weren't important back then. I mean, we talk about playwrights because theatre is. We have a long history of theatre. We know what theatre's about. Theatre is kind of a new thing at this time. It's the resurgence of it, at least, anyway. And so nobody cares about playwrights. And also, if the name on it didn't necessarily mean you wrote it, it just mean you owned it. And so I think old Shakespeare was essentially a theatre manager, and so he owned those plays. They were his property because they were bought, or I don't know, that was he was involved in the business. But yeah.
To kind of go along with the 33 number, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. Some have said maybe 1594. If Bacon was born in 1561, 1594, age 33, that would have kind of been the first publication or of either the poems or the plays. Yeah.
What was published then? Do you know?
I don't quite recall. I can't remember if it was, the Rape of Lucrece or Venus and Adonis play, but it just would go along with that. And so, but so he writes the plays, and he writes the plays with a group of people. You believe? Do you believe it's a group of them that write them?
I think his brother Anthony Bacon was also a writer. So I think there was collaboration with those two while Anthony was around. But yeah, I'm not sure if he's writing with other people at that time, like, how they would, I think, how do we see them doing that in a space? I mean, there's a few documentaries where you see, you know, a reenactment, and there's a bunch of guys in Elizabethan garb, all kind of, you know, like, yeah, sharing their ideas and, you know, writing them down. But I don't think it practically would have worked that way. But like, I think when we're talking about what's put under the Shakespeare name, I think perhaps other works could have been written by there's not many poets around at that time good enough to write something for the Shakespeare name. But I think if there was other writers that were writing stuff that was good enough, it had passed through Bacon's hands first. I think he was an editor also. I think he was editing stuff too. So everything would have come through him first, and he would have edited anything that did. So maybe there were other pieces of work that went through his hands that he didn't write but edited, and they were worthy of the Shakespeare name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did he have a relationship with the playwright Ben Jonson?
Well, Ben Jonson is probably like the key to the whole thing, because, you know, he's the editor of the Folio, so he knows the author. He knows exactly who the author is. But the weird thing about Jonson is that, you know, you can track his attitudes towards Shakespeare up to a point. He's really insulting. He writes this poem called Poet Ape, which is about somebody who steals from other writers and dresses it up as their own work. And I think he hates Shakespeare, but then there's a sort of a sudden change, and it seems to be around the time where he starts hanging out with Bacon. He has this flip, you know, and then he has nothing but praise for Shakespeare. He loves Shakespeare. Shakespeare is the soul of the age. Yeah. And he writes a lot of, he's written a few satires where he's got a character called Sogliardo, who's this kind of clown character who is trying to be a gentleman, goes out and buys a crest, which is what Shakespeare does, you know. Calls, I think there's a quote, something like, he's a swine without a head ramping to gentility. It's something like that. So, you know, he has contempt for Shakespeare, but then it seems that he meets Bacon, becomes aware that Bacon is the true author, and then they become very good friends. Bacon's 60th birthday is hosted by Jonson. He has this beautiful speech to Bacon, and there's some great stuff in there about Bacon standing in the middle of some mystery. And also Jonson is staying with Bacon in Gorhambury when the First Folio is put together, living at his house.
Okay.
You know, with Bacon when it's all put together. I mean,
yeah.
So not many people know that Bacon and Jonson were good friends, but they were dear friends. And there's no evidence that Jonson was friends with Stratford Guy. And then Stratford Guy dies on his birthday when Jonson goes to Stratford to see him on his birthday. Weird, because they're not friends. And then Shax dies the next day on his birthday, dies on his birthday after Jonson goes and hangs out with him. It's sus.
Yeah. Well, another famous author dies on that day, Cervantes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Far out.
And so some people, again,
Well, here's a mask for Bacon for sure.
yeah,
That Simon Miles has done some research on that, about that being one of the masks too. Yeah. Isn't that funny? I didn't know that.
Yeah. If you read, if you read Don Quixote with a Baconian eye, it's just there's so many clues there.
Yeah.
What was his purpose? What was his ultimate purpose? And we've touched on it. What was his ultimate purpose in writing the Shakespeare plays?
Oh, in writing the Shakespeare plays, I think that the theatre is part of Bacon's Great Reformation, his plan to change the world. And so, as well as being something that he loves about life, it's also something he can use as part of his grand plan. And he is taking the essence of ancient Greek theatre, which was about, kind of making man better, raising man closer to God, not only man's knowledge and intelligence, but our emotional, the emotional part of our nature. But I think Bacon is about truth and about nature, and us being part of nature, but also nature as in, I don't know, a cosmic spiritual sense as well. So I think with theatre, Bacon is using the idea that he got from France, that a new sophisticated language was needed in England, a better language was needed, and that new sophisticated language could also help with the stories that he wanted to, because I think he was also wanting to introduce us to the greatest stories that we have, stories that are from history, and also remember that he was also wanting to tell the story of England's rulers, which he has a direct connection to, and there's a cycle of all of those history plays. It's a complete cycle of rulers, and there's only one doesn't have. Not all of those are attributed to Shakespeare. Some of them are attributed to different writers, different pen names. The only one missing is Henry VII, and Bacon wrote a history of Henry VII, which kind of picks up and leaves off right in the right spot between the plays. And he has a direct connection with that. And so Shakespeare is quite obsessed with succession in the history plays, or in all the plays. It's kind of a pretty strong theme there. And of course, I mean, because he's connected to that. And then and Henry VIII is awesome too, because it finishes with with his mother being born. And I saw this American production online, and it finished with Elizabeth being born, and it had this giant projection of Queen Elizabeth I, and then Queen Elizabeth II came up too. Okay. After, and I was like, yeah.
And what year did he finish writing the plays? Is it known what year he kind of stopped writing the Shakespeare plays?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing too. I think the plays went through a lot of changes. I think it's interesting to think about whether he was attending the shows too. I mean, because I don't think he could have gone to the theatre, but these plays were also being performed at court and privately as well. So I think, maybe he's watching them and making changes, but also coming back to them after a long time, like, because you have the quarto versions of the plays, and some of those are really different to what ends up in the folio. And also there's some really interesting kind of knowledge within the plays, within the quarto versions, some scientific knowledge that Bacon changes his mind about, or things get updated, and so things get changed. But everything, I guess, gets kind of solidified with the folio. That's when it's kind of like, this is the ultimate collection. And yeah, that's the final thing.
Product.
Yeah, that's it. All the other stuff. Well, I mean, yeah, like I said, there was a bunch of other stuff that had the Shakespeare name on it that didn't make that cut. And then, you know, Jonson and Bacon put that folio together. But again, you know, it's understood that Hemmings and Condell, Shakespeare's actor buddies, somehow got all the scripts together and, you know, put it all together and then wrote all this material to put it, you know, I mean, it's absurd.
From the Stratfordian point of view.
From our point of view, that these actors were able to be editors and have access to all of those manuscripts, because that's crazy. I mean, Hemmings and Condell were probably in the same league as Shakespeare in terms of their, you know, their station in life and their abilities in general. But again,
what I was referring to is that's kind of the belief of the Stratfordian, how the folio came together. Not not Baconian, where it's Bacon and Jonson and others. Yeah.
And there's a few crucial little things in the material you get before the plays. There's some crucial little things in terms of leaving enough to perpetuate this myth of Shakespeare. There's a reference to Stratford. Stratford is in there, and Avon is in there as well. So, but these are Johnsonian poems, and they're very clever. They're not, you know, there's multiple meanings going on here. There's multiple readings, and so it's, you know, but it's enough to kind of make people connect the plays with Stratford. And then in Stratford, of course, there's the monument in the Trinity Church, which is put up around the same time as the folio comes out. So, and that's not much of an effort to go through to make sure that the story kind of checks out, because strangers would then go to the monument and but again, I think there were clues at the monument. I don't think the monument there now is not what was originally there. I think it's very different to what was originally there. And the monument originally showed two things, you know, this kind of a guy clutching at a sack of wool or grain, a rustic type of chap, and then this description in Latin, which most people wouldn't have been able to read at that time anyway, about someone who is like comparable with all of these amazing classic figures in classic literature and history and stuff. So, yeah, there's clues there. And again, the plaque at the monument starts with, you know, hey, stop and have a think about this, you know. You think this is Shakespeare here. You know, he says, stay and...
don't go by so fast or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's clues. You gotta play the game. And I mean, so both of those things are full of clues. Like, you know, you look at the Dröschout engraving in the folio, it's, you know, it's absurd. It's ridiculous. And
That's
yet
that's the picture of Shakespeare in the beginning of the folio.
Yeah, which is like, it's not a natural portrait. It's full of these anomalies and messages that tell you this is a caricature. This is this is a deception. You know, the doublet is sort of like folded out, and it gives him this sort of patch-like appearance, which again goes back to this kind of clowning type of association you get with Shakespeare, you know. So it's also this thing, Shakespeare, like, you know, we credit him as being an actor, but like we were saying, historically, Shakespeare was not an actor. He played a few bit roles, and that's about it. But he was an actor in the sense that he was playing the part of the father of these works. You know, he was a mask, and that was instrumental to the project. The project needed this mask. So there were two Shakespeares. There was the writer and the mask, and both were needed, both were important, both had their place. And both of those things are in that monument in Trinity Church. You see both the things there, the rustic businessman and the poet.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And of course, in Jonson's dedication in the portfolio, that is right next to the image, right? It says, "Do not look at the picture, basically, but look in the book."
Yeah,
for the identity of who is Shakespeare.
Exactly. So that having the name Shakespeare, as well as being Bacon's muse, it's and housing that message about working invisibly and fighting ignorance, it's also a way to unify the works and for a way for the author to hide, so that the works are what's important. It's like, it's not important who wrote this. This is the work. This is what you should focus on. And that kind of works for a lot of people, because a lot of people will say, does it matter who wrote Shakespeare? You know, I just love the work. I just want the work to live. You know, a lot of people say that, and that shows that the mission worked. You know, that was the mission. Just love the works. Don't worry about who wrote it. Because at the time, the authors couldn't come out about who actually wrote it, because it was too dangerous. Mm-hmm. So it's so clever and so beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's so much more than we think. And yet that image, the Dröschout engraving image, is our iconic image of Shakespeare. It's like, it's what we all know Shakespeare to be, but ironically, it's a caricature. It's like it's suggesting
a mask.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. And
it's in plain sight, but you've got to look for it. This is the whole thing. It's all there. You've just got to pierce the veil, look for it, find it. But most of us aren't up for that.
Yeah. I think Bacon, and of course, he was a dissembler in the best sense of the word. He has an essay on dissembling, lying, basically, to kind of throw people off the trail. So that's kind of, he loved that. I think he loved doing that. And that was kind of part of his jesting and his having fun. And it also, you know, a lot of his, what he kind of the esoteric things that he writes, you do need to delve in, you do need to know geometry, you do need to know some of these things. But to your point, some of it is hiding in plain sight. You just have to go slow with it.
Yeah.
And knowing his story helps you to see, you know, what he's really writing about.
Yeah. And I honestly think that he was sure that one day people would work it out, you know. People would work it out. They either just see it for themselves, but I also think, yeah, he was leaving messages many different ways, you know, like many different types of cipher. I think he was using, you know, there's probably heaps of stuff that still hasn't been found, but so I think he was definitely leaving us clues, you know, and I think he definitely wanted, you know, I always think about Prospero in The Tempest at the end, how, you know, he asks the audience to set him free. And I feel a little bit with Bacon that he's waiting for the day where, you know, he gets recognized for what he did on some level and is cleared of, you know, his name is cleared of all of the stuff, you know. I think he was punished because he prosecuted Essex. First of all, I think that's the first point in history where people go, oh, Bacon, what did you, you know, because he prosecutes Essex, but
which he hated doing, by the way.
The Queen made him do that. Yeah. He was doing his duty. His duty was to the Queen always first. So I think there's a lot of beef with Bacon about that. And then, of course, there's the whole thing about the bribery, which, you know, is just, yeah, absurd. But, yeah, he was never really cleared of that, you know. He was never asked back to court, I don't think. And then later historians, yeah, were really damning of Bacon. So it's so weird. But so I feel like Bacon is a bit off the radar because of this kind of brush he's been tarred with by history. And I think, yeah, he wanted to, and I think he went into exile rather than dying on Easter Day from stuffing snow up a chicken. I don't think he actually died. But yeah, I think I think he must have been that must have really been horrible to have been shamed like that, driven out from court. And I think I like the play Time On, which is a play that appeared first in the First Folio, which is all about someone who is so generous and trusting with his friends, and he's just betrayed when he's in trouble. They all kind of desert him, and I think he was really betrayed by a lot of people, and that must have been really hard for his name to have been, you know, tarnished like that. But here's a man who lives his whole life under another person's name. I mean, like it's funny with his names, his identity. You know, he lives his whole life kind of concealed. You know, his whole life is kind of one big secret, and I feel like he was waiting for the day where the truth comes out, you know, and this was a big thing of his. You know, on the front page of New Atlantis, there's that really lovely image of truth coming out of a cave. You know, it's like the truth will come out, and I think he really believed that. And yeah.
If you were to point someone to some of the Shakespeare plays to find references to Bacon, what are some of the plays you would point to? I think he's
like I said before, I think so many of his ideas, his philosophy, his experiments with nature, his training with the law, all of these things are in there. You can find all of the facets of his life are within those places he went, he traveled. Again, this comes up with De Vere. Well, De Vere was in Italy, but Bacon was in Italy too. All of the places he'd been, and the people. I think what's interesting about what Bacon does as well is when using his sources, rather than create something new, he will take a source that exists already, and then brilliantly just tweak it, change it a bit so that it fits in with what is happening at the time. Because this is the brilliant thing about theatre, is that you can talk about the past or talk about a fictional world, but you're actually talking about what's happening now, the people that are around us now. And so you can make very powerful statements. And there's a play, All's Well, that ends well, that beautifully takes this source and then makes it about Oxford. Bertram is all about Oxford. Bertram is Oxford, but Bacon, he knows he's able to, change the original source to fit the story. And that's a great example of Bacon using his family. Because there's a lot of crossover with families as well. So he's kind of like very connected. And so that for me is a nice play about Bacon using sources. And but look, you can find him everywhere. You can find him in Hamlet as well. That often gets attributed to De Vere, but again, it works equally for everything. Works equally for Bacon. But I think you and I were talking about earlier on, those plays are about love and magic, and the comedies, which are more about moving towards love. And then later on, there are plays that explore tragedy, which are all about the opposite, what happens when we don't love. And I feel like there's a lot of, with Time On is a great example, where he's probably using his writing to kind of like process his emotions, like as a great release for him, I would say, to not only release it into his writing, but also to release it into the public as well. The kinds of messages he's able to send out with these plays. And so, but when I think about Bacon, the one I mostly think about is The Tempest, I think. And The Tempest is a play that's often said to be one of the most biographical plays of Shakespeare. And I think Bacon is all over The Tempest.
And referring to The Tempest, right, in a scene of identity, which has been pointed out by Peter Amundsen and others, in the scene of identity, you have the F. Bacon acrostic, right?
Yeah. And in the folio, I think there's this the first letter of the play is an F, I think, or is it a B or an F? Maybe it's a B, but around it there's this microscopic ornamentation of Francis Bacon around the very first letter. And then, of course, the play finishes with the word free. which again I think is the same cipher count as Francis. I think Free and Francis.
Can you talk a little bit about that cipher count, what that means, what that is?
Yeah, I can't say I'm great with the cipher stuff because, well, the numerical stuff anyway. It's sort of like words have a number value, and there's something kind of like I don't know. There's meaning in the numbers, some kind of significance. There's a lot of Bacon I can't quite wrap my head around. I mean, I'm just sort of a theatre teacher and an actor. A lot of it is way beyond me. But again, it's a way of leaving a signature. Ciphers, for me, they're a way of, either having a message, containing a message, or a signature. So Bacon was kind of responsible for creating a lot of ciphers at that time. And I think there was a book that came out either a little bit before or a little bit after. There was a book that came out about cipher, and it included a lot of these. So maybe, I don't know if the book was released by Bacon, it was another mask of Bacon's, I don't know. But around the same time as the Folio comes out, this big book about ciphers comes out too, almost as to suggest it's a companion piece, like you need this to appreciate this, you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of great stuff, and Peter Amundsen was great because he has one of those minds that is able to kind of like process the ciphers and find them as well. But yeah, full of, I think Folio is probably full of that stuff, as are a lot of writings from the time. I think Bacon was dropping a lot of cipher into different works, whether they were under his name or others, in the hopes that we'd put it all together. Somebody did that ages ago. They made a big wheel and they printed off the pages. There was a big contraption made, I think, to try and to put all of the text together and then pull the cipher out of that.
Okay. Yeah. I was not aware of that.
Yeah. Cipher wheel. It's called a cipher wheel. And somebody, but I can't remember if there were instructions in cipher that this is what you should do. You should make a wheel and put the text on the wheel. I can't remember, but it's interesting. Yeah.
And I think he has a few numerical values, but his quintessential numerical value is 33. Is that correct?
Okay. Yeah. So when I first got into Bacon, I was wanting to, just create a group. So just a movement. I was like, we've got to get a movement. So I was calling us Posse 33 because I was like, the number of Bacon. I also got this tattooed here as well. There's the double A's. This is the headpiece you find in a lot of. This is the Rosy Cross. And 33 Bacon cipher number. That's how much of a nerd I am. I have Bacon tattoos, mate.
You love them.
I have a Shakespeare tattoo. This one here. This is a spear serpent.
Oh yeah.
This is the pot of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I got this. This one is from. This one is from an engraving, a Bacon engraving, where it's this arm with a quill coming out from behind a curtain, and the motto says, by the mind I shall be seen. By the mind I will be seen, I think it is. Beautiful engraving. I was like, I want that on my arm.
Yeah. I know this is going to be a tough question, but why do you love Bacon?
I think because you've got to love this man. He's like Jesus. How can you not love Jesus? because they are both like, it comes back to this kind of philanthropic nature of his, that everything Bacon did was for humanity, was for future generations, and the fact that he did that without any ego, without asking for anything, like he doesn't get recognized by his own mother, but he makes peace with that, and he kind of moves on and decides to, just like devote himself to the betterment of mankind, because he recognizes that he is exceptional and that he's been given something, and he feels a responsibility to do everything he can to make full use of that. And he does. He works like tirelessly all through his life for that one purpose. And how can you not love that and also be inspired by anyone who's that exceptional, with anyone with all of those talents, all of those gifts, and to still be a good person, uncorrupted. And so inspirational. And there's also the side of his story that, as I was saying with Time On and The Tempest, that his name needs to be cleared. I feel like he needs to be, and he needs recognition. So for me, when I've read his story, I instantly felt the need to use all my gifts to get his story out there. Which is why I call myself one of the sons of Bacon, because you become sort of like a devotee of sorts. But I mean, you have to be aware that Bacon was very careful about the cult of personality. He was very aware, I think, of what Jesus was really about, and he saw, I think, what the church could do to a message, I think. And so he was really careful, not to become a cult, not to attract a sort of a cult following. But I think he still he had people around him that must have been very adoring and devoted, and I feel that way about him. And just becomes very present in your life, and just kind of like really gets me curious about the world. Like since meeting Francis, I'm asking more questions. I'm more kind of into nature. I'm more sort of at peace in a way. So he brings a lot of great things to your life, but also for me, like just engaging with life's mysteries, he's been a huge part of that for me. So
Wonderful. And regarding the Francis Bacon Society, can anyone join the society?
They would love to hear from you. And like I said, I think it's really though the Bacon Society, I think, was much bigger, grander, I think it's still very much alive and going places. Like I said to you, I feel all of us Baconians from different generations are always thinking like, this could be it, it's around the corner, it's coming. Maybe we all think that, but I definitely get a sense of that at the moment. And the society are really trying to get active in terms of just getting the word out, you know.
So, and again, if people want to join, they can go to the Francis Bacon Society website, and I believe it's through PayPal maybe, or some other means you can join. There is a fee, correct?
Not sure. Yeah, maybe a little one.
A little one, yeah, just little. Yeah, it's not terribly expensive. And then if they want to see you kind of exploring Baconian things, they can see you on YouTube as well, Jono Freeman.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jono, so much.
Nice to meet you, bud. Take care.